exciting time for the veterans as well as the spouses and their guests, because it's something that the Bailey bus tours do every year, and it's something the vets look forward to. We look forward to this every year.
For John Bailey to provide the buses and all, and the fleet and all the different organizations to get together, it's great.
It's going to be a great trip for these men and women here to get on the bus, to share their experiences, have a good time, reminisce, and see pieces of the past that many of them served on or in times of war.
November 11th, Veterans Day. A day that should not only be remembered, but honored. Both men and women risked and sacrificed their lives to protect our country and the rights we all hold so dearly. I'm Chris Henry, a video journalist at Spring Grove Area High School. Veterans Day is something that has always been important to me. I believe that it is the duty of each U.S. citizen to give their thanks to those who have protected our freedoms. I've had the privilege of attending the All Vets trip for the past 2 years. During these trips, I have discovered what Veterans Day means to me and have developed a deeper understanding of the sacrifices made by each veteran. We are here to help share stories of veterans and take a look at the wars in which they served and learn more about history.
I do recall my first days. There was, of course, some excitement. There was, of course, a little bit of uncertainty about where we would go or what I would do.
Basic training, commonly referred to as boot camp, is where every soldier begins their service.
I was lower than a gnat. I recall all that, yeah, I do.
It helps prepare soldiers for the elements of service, including physical, mental, and emotional aspects. It does not, however, prepare them for what they will see in combat and the after effects when they come back.
It was different than what they expect.
I enjoyed it. It was an experience, yes.
First day is kind of scary. You're afraid of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, where you're going to do, what's going to happen.
Boot camp and everything was fine. When Vietnam was a completely different setup. Everything changed over there. They train you for things, but you're not trained for stuff you see.
Boot camp is where soldiers gain the basic tools necessary to perform the roles that they will be assigned to. Every veteran that I have talked to always has something to say about boot camp, whether it's good or bad.
What was it like?
Miserable. A PFC threatened to have us scrub the barracks with toothbrushes. Then
Sounds fun.
Then in the afternoon, we shipped out to Camp Wheeler, Georgia.
My first actual day in service was at airborne schools, learning how to be a paratrooper, learning how to jump out of perfectly fine airplanes down at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I'd gone there without any training. The Army sent me there before any other training. And so it's a good thing I was raised in a military family, so I knew I actually kind of had a march. And the biggest mistake I made my first day there, I just told the barber to take all my hair off. The next day, this is in Georgia, in June, they made us take off our hats for 3 hours and sit in the sun listening to some guy yell at us. And it gave me such bad burn that my skin came off in clumps. It was second-degree burn on my head. It was terrible. That was my introduction to the United States Army.
Makes a better person out of you if you can come back after knowing you did a good job in everything. I think it really helped.
It was a good time. You met a lot of different guys from all over the United States.
In the end, it all worked out great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world.
World War II began in Europe in 1939 when Hitler rose to power in Germany and invaded Poland. It wasn't until the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1945, that the U.S. actively joined the war.
Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor from the air and all naval and military activities on the island of Oahu.
The U.S. lost a total of 418,500 soldiers and civilians. Of those casualties, 2,403 deaths occurred during the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Calvin Coolidge Lee Park. Along with 4 brothers, 5 of us was in World War II. I'm the only one left. I went to New Caledonia, New Zealand, joined my outfit, the jungles of British New Guinea, 120 in the shade. From there, the invasion of Luzon. I got shot, come down to Atlantia, that's New Guinea, back up to the Philippines to Japan, and Japan home. And people said, "Oh, you were in the Navy." I said, "No, I was in the infantry." Shot. I guess
you got
I
shot?
did.
Wow. Where at?
Right through my right thigh. My partner, a direct hit, he blew all the pieces. Most people don't realize what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, you watch these movies, that's it simple because they're not going to be killed. But in the real action, your life is in danger. The actors are not.
The Axis powers fell like dominoes to the Allied powers. Italy surrenders September 8, 1943, after the downfall of the fascist Prime Minister Benito Mussolini. Germany then surrenders May 7, 1945, following the suicide of Adolf Hitler, and Japan surrenders September 7, 1945, after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th, respectively. Around June 1950, North Korea gains enough power to invade South Korea. South Korean forces retreat, and the UN allows the US to step in to aid South Korea. December of 1950, US Marines are driven out of North Korea by North Korean allies, Communist China.
A number was served. And some came home and some didn't come home. And I'm glad to say that I'm one that's at home.
Fighting continues until July 27, 1953, when an armistice ends hostilities and a border is set between North and South Korea. North Korea becomes a communist society, and South Korea becomes a constitutional republic. There was a total of 36,914 U.S. combat casualties.
It's different. It's hard to explain to somebody that's never been there. I mean, you're sitting in a bunker every day. It's a little bit different than what everybody's used to.
Just got out of high school and thought it would be a nice adventure. They sent me to Vietnam on my senior trip.
I enlisted in the Air Force in early '66, and I was in basic training for 2 weeks. My dad wrote me a letter and said, "You were supposed to report. Been drafted, Fort Gordon, Army."
I was drafted, yep, during it was '66 is when they had to draft for a few years there, and I was one of the lucky ones.
The Vietnam War starts May 7, 1954, after Northern Communist forces invade and exert power in the democratic South. The U.S. joined forces with Southern Vietnam, losing a recorded 58,220 U.S. soldiers on Vietnam soil. While the war started in May of 1954, the U.S. doesn't join until the 60s, after 2 U.S. aircrafts are shot down and a prisoner of war is taken.
My name's Bob Miller. I served in the U.S. Army National Guard. I enlisted in 1970. After I graduated from college, the draft was going on at that point in time. I had a very high, and they assigned lottery numbers to us. I had a very high lottery number, probably would never have been drafted, but I felt an obligation to serve the country. So I joined the National Guard as part of my service after college.
Just the one, Vietnam. I was in areas, but I didn't really see any combat. I was with the 3rd Tanks, the maintenance.
I thought it was good. I had good duty. I was in Okinawa. It's like a support station for Vietnam. I was in the Vietnam area. And the island was all right. It wasn't the best, but we were in old barracks, but it worked. Everything worked.
The Vietnam War was still on. Employment was essential. I was already married in college, and my father and brother were both in the Marine Corps, so I picked the Marine Corps. Serve my country, how's that?
Following 3 decades of disputes and fighting, in January 1975, President Ford declares U.S. military involvement is no longer necessary.
I was in during the Vietnam War. Well, I didn't go to Vietnam. I was in experimental electronics out at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Well, we worked on a program that was top secret at the time, and I never heard about the program again after I got out of the military until the Afghan War, when I realized that we worked on the very first drones. They didn't look anything like they do now. They didn't work anything like they did now. We had a lot of crashes and a lot of accidents, but I was on the initial crew that developed the drones.
April 19, 1975, the South Vietnamese capital is seized and South Vietnam surrenders.
My name is Robert Clunk, and I was in the Marine Corps, and I served up in Vietnam in the DMZ. I was a radio operator. I get out of high school, and I decided I might as well enlist because they were going to come and draft you anyhow, and I thought if I'm going to go, I'm going to pick the best one to go in, and I'm going to do it on my terms.
You're a veteran, you are serving your country. But it didn't feel like that. To me, it was like a very good time. I enjoyed it all. I mean, flying is not like going to work.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like being on a baseball team, and you get paid.
In July 1975, Vietnam is unified as a socialist republic under communist rule, thus ending the Vietnamese conflict.
Never had anybody firing back at me for real. And I admire all the guys that did. You know, there's plenty of people here who never had a shot fired at them. But it's the luck of the draw. I didn't try to avoid it. I was there for 23 years. They had their chances.
Everything was in chaos and we didn't know what was going on, so it was very nerve-wracking at that time.
Very alert when danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do.
Although the Cold War wasn't a combat war, it was a war in which tensions rose intercontinentally. The Cold War begins roughly in the 1950s when the Soviets begin testing atomic bombs, starting the arms race. Soviets and the US fight to attain the most firepower to exert their dominance as a world power. This is when the Red Scare occurred in the United States, when Joseph McCarthy begins accusing people of being communists.
Every year you practice, the wives and the kids would pack their stuff up and pretend the Soviets were invading. You had to sign all these papers and get on buses. It's called emergency evacuation order.
This essentially creates a nationwide panic and a sense of distrust in each other. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite and man-made object to orbit the Earth, thus starting the space race. On October 16, 1962, the Soviet Union sets up base on Cuba and points missiles at the US. The US then responds by creating a blockade. This would later become known as the Cuban Missile Crisis.
He served in Greenland, Sonderstrom Air Force Base. That is above the Arctic Circle. And he was there for 4 years. He flew on the KC-97, which is a refueling plane, and they refueled the bombers that needed to be. That was during the Cold War.
The crisis ends in a standoff. The US agrees not to invade Cuba as long as the Soviet Union dismantles their missiles and leaves. Although peace was never truly established with the Soviet Union and later Russia, tensions diffused, but hostilities remain to this day. The Afghanistan conflict began on October 7, 2001, following the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in New York, the Pentagon, and the failed attack on the White House. The US would invade Afghanistan to apprehend Osama bin Laden, the man who founded Al-Qaeda and orchestrated the September 11th attack.
So I started off during the Cold War on the Czechoslovakian and East German borders, and then when that ended, deployed to Saudi Arabia to liberate Kuwait. So we fought in Iraq in 1991. And then after 9/11, did 3 tours in Afghanistan, and also supported the missions in the Balkans, in Bosnia, to bring peace there and stop the genocide.
The Afghanistan War has continued to present day, with U.S. troops' presence in Afghanistan, causing tensions with the Taliban.
For a long time, they were shunned and everything else. Now that it's like the nation's getting behind the vets and appreciating what they did and when they did it and how long they did it. So I'm grateful for that. I really am. Yeah.
There are 22,266 casualties to date.
When you think of a veteran, we think of a lot of different things. But there's about 8 attributes, 8 principles that I think help to define all of us. First and foremost is dedication. And that's dedication to a purpose and dedication to a set of ideals. Second is commitment, and that's a commitment to excellence. Yeah, we're not always perfect, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to do our best, and we're going to let the rest take care of itself. Third is discipline, and that's the discipline to see a task to completion. There's courage, and that's the courage to do the right thing, to do the right things right, and to do the right things right for the right reasons, but there's also the courage to give of yourself. There's a loyalty that we have, right? Loyalty to those that we served with, and loyalty to those units that we served in. It took some strength, right? It took physical strength, but it also took strength of character. It took some fortitude to endure some really difficult and tough situations. And the last thing it took was compassion. Compassion for our fellow human beings. And yes, we have all served, and I bet you every one of us still serves today in some way, shape, or form. You still serve. And you take those same 8 attributes that I mentioned, and you bring those to that service of those organizations today.
I'd like to thank all of those who served our country, to veterans and their families, because we recognize that without their sacrifices, we would not be able to enjoy the freedoms we have today. Thank you for watching, and I hope this has positively affected what Veterans Day means to you.